and welcome to another session of literary theory. This is class 13 and we were discussing literary theory and liberal humanism. We have to discuss more points about this, and so let's continue with the class. Literary theory does not refer to the meaning of a literary text. Literary theory എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ meaning of a literary text അല്ല. So what is it? But പിന്നെ എന്താണ്? It is a set of principles or tools which are used to make meanings out of a literary text. Meaning അല്ല എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞു. Just meaning കണ്ടുപിടിക്കുന്നതല്ല literary theory. But it is a set of principles or tools by which you interpret a literary text. A set of principles ആണ് അല്ലെങ്കിൽ tools ആണ്, and with the help of these tools you create a meaning out of a literary text that you get. So don't confuse it with literary criticism. I've told you earlier that there is a difference, or there exists a difference between literary criticism and literary theory. We often use this word interchangeably. Literary criticism and literary theory, we use it interchangeably. No, there is a difference. Literary criticism is an umbrella term used to interpret a literary text or a piece of literature. An umbrella term ആണ്, general term ആണ്. ഒരു literary work analyze ചെയ്യാൻ അല്ലെങ്കിൽ criticize ചെയ്യാൻ, നിരൂപണം ചെയ്യാൻ, review ചെയ്യാനുള്ള ഒരു umbrella term ആണ് literary criticism. But literary theory is a framework or frameworks used for the interpretation of a literary text. ഒരു സെറ്റ് ഫ്രെയിംവർക്ക് ആണ്, അതിൻ്റെ ഉള്ളിൽ വെച്ചിട്ടാണ് നമ്മൾ ഒരു ലിറ്റററി ടെക്സ്റ്റിനെ ഇന്റർപ്രറ്റ് ചെയ്യുന്നത്, and that is literary theory. These principles, which principles? The set of principles we talked about while discussing literary theory. So these principles can either be derived from the text itself or from external areas. Each set of principles either exist within the text or outside the text, external areas, and these are academic disciplines like philosophy, history, anthropology, psychology, linguistics, and sociology. ഇതിൽ നിങ്ങൾക്ക് അറിയാത്ത അക്കാഡമിക് ഡിസിപ്ലിൻ ഓഫ് കോഴ്സ് എല്ലാം അറിയുന്നതായിരിക്കും, ബട്ട് ഒരു കൺഫ്യൂഷണൽ ഏരിയ മേ ബി ആന്ത്രോപോളജി. ആന്ത്രോപോളജി I've told you before is a study of human behavior. Then philosophy is a study of fundamental truth of existence. Then sociology is a study of human society or social problems. Jonathan Culler, in his literary theory, a very short introduction, published in the year 1997, offers a simple exposition. Exposition means explanation. And Jonathan Culler is an American literary critic. The explanation he gives is that writings from outside the field of literary studies have been taken up or analyzed by people in literary studies, which means that the people or the experts in the field of literary studies have taken up the works of people of other fields of activity. It can be science, religion, invention, and medicines. So the people or the writers or authors who deal with literature is not just analyzing literary works. They're analyzing the authors or the writers of other academic disciplines also. And he gives a reason for this. The reason he gives is that their analysis of language, mind, history, or culture offer a new and persuasive account, which means that their analysis analyses, that is it is plural. Analysis nu parayumbo it is singular, analyses nu parayum it is plural. So there are different works of analysis. It provides a new and persuasive account. Persuasive means very convincing or compelling account, and that is a plus point over there. So that is it. As I told you, analysis is singular and analyses is plural. Analysis singular analyses is plural. And likewise, I want to tell you one more thing. Analyze is British English and analyze, Z is American English. S is British English and Z, when you use it, is American English. We Indians use British English. You'll be knowing that. Okay. Moving on, the major schools of literary theory are Marxism, Structuralism, Feminism, Post-Structuralism and Postmodernism. Literary theory helps the readers to gain a deeper understanding. When you go by the literary theory, it helps you to gain a deeper understanding because they are drawing on a critical theory to gain a further insight into literary text. When you make an in-depth analysis of a literary text and when you draw or when you depend on a critical theory or literary theory, it gives you further insights. It gives you a deep understanding of the literary text that you're studying or that you're interpreting. Right. The term theory is derived from the Greek word theoria, which means a view of the stage. So, theory derived from the Greek word theoria and the meaning is view of the stage. Literary theories offers different perspective about literary works. So, it is a literary theory that offers different perspectives or different points of view about a literary work. Literary work in കാണണം അതിനെപ്പറ്റി നമുക്ക് കൂടുതൽ അറിയാനായിട്ട് we have to depend on literary theory. But these theories claim that theories what do they claim? They claim that they represent a comprehensive view of literature. These critical theories or literary theories claim that they provide a comprehensive view of literature. What is comprehensive view of literature? It means that it includes all the elements. It is inclusive of all the elements. That is comprehensive view of literature. That is what literary theories claim. These schools of literary theory was prevalent in the last century. Literary theories was widespread or they existed in the last century. Last century was the 20th century. Now it is 21st century. From the year 2000, we are in the 21st century. Now, these schools of literary theory was prevalent in the last century, that is 20th century, which means that it was in the last century that the moment of theory was prevalent. Moment of theory in the particular sambhavam existed in the last century because it began or it was in its peak in the last century, that is 20th century. It was widespread. Began but it was widespread in the last century, that is 20th century. It continues to hold sway in academic circles. Now, even now it continues to hold sway or it is dominating the literary and academic circles even now. These literary theories. There are two important observations based on these claims. First observation is that literary theory has damaged the universal claims of liberal humanism regarding literature. First observation, literary theory has damaged the claims of liberal humanism, which means that both are contradictory. Second observation is that liberal humanist theories as well as literary theories continue to exert their influence in literary studies. So, second observation is that both liberal humanist theories and literary theories continue to exert their influence in literary circles or literary studies. Both of them have still an influence in the literary circle. Peter Barry sums up the common principles of theory as thus: politics is pervasive, language is constitutive, truth is provisional, meaning is contingent, and human nature is a myth. So here, politics is pervasive. Politics is widespread. Politics is present everywhere. It is omnipresent. That is, politics is pervasive. Politics exist. It is prevalent. It is widespread. Then language is constitutive. Constitutive എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞു കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ it has the power to establish or organize. So language has a role. It is constitutive, which means that it establishes something or it organizes something. That is a trait of language. Then truth is provisional. Provisional എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ temporary ആണ്. Provisional certificate എന്നൊക്കെ പറയില്ലേ, temporary ആണ്. So truth is provisional. ഇനി truth temporary ആണെന്ന് പറയാൻ പറ്റില്ല. It is short lived എന്ന് പറയാം. Okay, it has only a short term existence. കുറച്ച് കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ വേറൊരു ട്രൂത്തും നമ്മളെ ഇൻഫ്ലുവൻസ് ചെയ്യും. So truth is provisional means that truth is short term or it is temporary. After some time there are many truths which we'll have to absorb into ourselves. Then meaning is contingent. Meaning എന്ന് പറയാൻ contingent ആണ്. Contingent means dependent or conditional. So from situation to situation meaning differs. So meaning is subject to change. ഓരോ സിറ്റുവേഷനിലും ഓരോ മീനിങ് വ്യത്യാസമായിരിക്കും. സോ ഇറ്റ് ഇസ് കണ്ടീഷണൽ ഓർ ഡിപ്പെൻഡന്റ്. ദാറ്റ് ഇസ് കണ്ടിൻജന്റ്. മീനിങ് ഇസ് കണ്ടിൻജന്റ്. ഹ്യൂമൻ നേച്ചർ ഇസ് എ മിത്ത് എന്നാണ് പറയുന്നത്. സോ ഹ്യൂമൻ നേച്ചർ ഇസ് എ മിത്ത് മീൻസ് ദാറ്റ് ഹ്യൂമൻ നേച്ചർ എന്ന് പറയുന്നത് എപ്പോഴും സെയിം ആയിരിക്കണം എന്നില്ല. ഇറ്റ് ഇസ് എ മിത്ത്. മിത്ത് എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ എന്താ, നമ്മൾ പണ്ട് ഫോക്ക് ടെയിൽസ്, ഒരു സ്റ്റോറീസ്, നമ്മുടെ പണ്ട് കാലത്ത് കേൾക്കുന്ന ഒരു കഥകൾ, കെട്ടുകഥകളാവാം, റിയൽ ആവാം, നമ്മൾ വിശ്വസിക്കുന്നു. അതാണ് മിത്ത് അല്ലേ, വിത്ത് സോ മെനി സൂപ്പർ നാച്ചുറൽ എലിമെന്റ്സ് ഇൻ ഇറ്റ്. ദാറ്റ് ഇസ് എ മിത്ത്. അങ്ങനെ മിത്ത് എന്ന് പറയാം. അല്ലെങ്കിൽ റിയാലിറ്റിയുടെ ഓപ്പോസിറ്റ് ആയിട്ട് നമുക്ക് മിത്ത് എന്ന് പറയാം. ഇവിടെ റിയാലിറ്റിയുടെ ഓപ്പോസിറ്റ് ആയിട്ടാണ്, ആ മിത്താണ് നമ്മൾ അധികം പറയുന്നത്. അപ്പൊ human nature എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ it is not common. It differs from people to people. So human nature is a myth means it is a misconception that you have a general idea about human nature. Again, it changes from person to person. That is this human nature. The very first glimpses of literary theory in modern times means 20th century, was seen in Europe, particularly in Germany. So one can call this higher criticism or source criticism. And this higher criticism or source criticism analyzed the Bible for the first time in history. So Bible was analyzed for the first time. And this was in contrast to the existing method of interpretation. That is, analysis of Bible was in contrast. That is, it was totally different from the existing method of interpretation. Elements of later schools of theory like structuralism and new historicism can be detected in this higher criticism. By the way, what is structuralism and new historicism? We have discussed structuralism before. It depends on the underlying structuralism. And new historicism is a literary theory based on the idea that literature should be interpreted within the context of both history of the author and history of the critic. So this is in contrast to the closed reading. Liberal humanism tenets closed reading. That is, just read only the text and the words, only read it verbally and no need of considering the context. That is closed reading. That is, text is self-contained, self-sufficient. That is closed reading. New historicism means that it is a literary theory based on the idea that literature should be interpreted within the context of both history of the author and history of the critic. നേരെ തിരിച്ചാണ്. That is, when you interpret a work of literature, you should also consider the history of the author and also the history of the critic who is criticizing the literary work. Which means that new historicism is a parallel reading of literary and non-literary text. It is a parallel reading of literary and ആ സമയത്ത് non-literary text കൂടി വായിച്ചിട്ട് നമുക്ക് ആ ടൈം പീരീഡിൽ എന്തൊക്കെ ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നു എന്നുള്ള അനുഭവങ്ങളും കാര്യങ്ങളൊക്കെ അറിഞ്ഞിരിക്കണം എന്നാണ് ന്യൂ ഹിസ്റ്റോറിസിസം പറയുന്നത്. Critics and literary historians differ in their estimation of the rise of the theory or movement of the theory in the 1950s. So, since they differ, there were two sections. First section was that which attributed this, that is the rise of the theory or movement of theory, to Ferdinand de Saussure and his structural linguistics. Saussure, for your knowledge, is a Swiss linguist. He is the most influential linguist of the 20th century. He's a founder of 20th century linguistics. One of the founders of 20th century linguistics. The other founder is Charles Sanders Peirce. As I told you, he was a Swiss linguist. Another section attributed the moment of theory to the publication of Anatomy of Criticism by Northrop Frye in the year 1957. Northrop Frye is a Canadian literary critic and a literary theorist, and he was one of the most influential 20th century literary theorists. So, we were discussing that critics and literary historians differ in their estimation of the rise of theory. One section attributed this to Ferdinand de Saussure and structural linguistics, and the other section attributed moment of theory to the publication of Anatomy of Criticism by Northrop Frye in the year 1957. Literary historian and critic David Ayers connects the advent of the theory, advent means coming of the theory, with the post-war political developments in England and America, particularly New Left. New Left comprising of Marxist, socialist thinkers and the academe. Academe means the academic community. So David Ayers, who is a literary historian and critic, connects the advent of the theory with the post-war political developments in England and America, and it was mainly the New Left comprising the Marxist, socialist thinkers and the academic community. They were on one hand disillusioned with the Stalinist model of socialism and also suppression of Hungarian uprising, and they were enraged with imperialist designs and capitalist exploitation. So disillusioned, disappointed. They were disappointed or they were not satisfied with the Stalinist model of socialism. Stalinist model of socialism endanu namukku ariyam. Stalinist was a dictator of USSR. USSR is a Union of Soviet Socialist Republic, that is USSR. So our socialism undirunnu. He was like a Stalinist model of socialism. So what is this Stalinist model of socialism? Since he was a dictator, dictator avu namukku ariyam, ekadhipatiyanu. So from 1929 to 1953, under Stalin, Soviet Union was transformed from a peasant society to industrial and military superpower. So which means that there was development in the industrial sector, and also it arose in military superpower. It arose as a military superpower. But he ruled by terror. There was terrorism around. However, his brutal reign caused the death of millions of citizens. It was a cruel or a brutal reign. And that was how he ruled. So since he created terror, he was a dictator from 1929 to 1953. So that is a Stalinist model of socialism. There was development in industry and military power, but he ruled by terror. And coming to suppression of Hungarian uprising. What is Hungarian uprising? Hungarian uprising was in the year 1956, and it was a nationwide revolution against the Hungarian People's Republic and its Soviet imposed policies. So this Hungarian uprising was a revolution against Soviet imposed policies. Soviet against Soviet Union USSR. So it was a revolution or protest against Hungarian People's Republic and Soviet imposed policies. So there were protests and revolutions or uprising throughout the world. Then people were enraged with imperialist designs. Imperialist means power politics. There is so much of domination around you. Power politics, that's imperialist designs. Capitalist exploitation of US and Western European democracies. Capitalist exploitation, capitalism means it is based on property. Mudaladatha samskara capitalism. So capitalist exploitation, people used to that is capitalists or the owners used to exploit the working class. So capitalist exploitation of US and Western European democracies. So they were enraged, people were enraged or angry with the capitalist exploitation and also the imperialist designs. There are other factors that have influenced theory. So there were other factors also influenced critical theory or literary theory. One was influential works of the French Marxist philosopher Louis Althusser, and the second one was the establishment of Contemporary Center for Cultural Studies in the year 1963, and that was at Birmingham University. So these are the other factors that influenced the theory or influenced the theory. First one was the influential works of French Marxist philosopher Louis Althusser, and the second one was establishment of Contemporary Center for Cultural Studies in the year 1963 at Birmingham University in the United Kingdom, England. Fine. Patricia Wu has made an observation in this regard. Patricia Wu's observation goes like this, and it serves as a concluding remark. Theory rose in the context of significant cultural and historical changes in the 60s, coinciding with a number of important intellectual challenges to ways of thinking about philosophy, science and art. So Patricia Wu observes this way, that is, theory rose in the context of significant cultural and historical changes in the 60s and 1960s. There are a lot of cultural changes and historical changes, and along with those changes, there are a lot of intellectual changes too. And that was happening in the field of philosophy, science and art. So intellectual changes to ways of thinking about philosophy, science and art, which means that there was a different point of view, or there were a different perspective in the field of philosophy, science and art. Patricia Wu is a literary critic and professor of English at Durham University. And talking about USSR. USSR was dissolved in the year 1991. And the year 1922, it was a former communist republic. It was a former communist country. And it included Russia and 14 other republics. Russia, Ukraine, these kind of republics it included. So it was a former communist country in the year 1922, dissolved in the year 1991. Russia, USSR mari parayarundu. Now it is not existing, it is no longer there. So thank you, and we are winding up the session for today. Have a nice day.